Jesse Israel is a meditation leader known for founding the mass meditation movement, The Big Quiet. He was invited to tour with Oprah Winfrey and has led mass meditations at sold-out arenas throughout the United States. Here, he discusses the simple ways one can get started with a meditation practice, the science behind meditation, and the benefits of meditation for the mind and on the nervous system, the importance of rest, and why now is the perfect time to get started meditating.
Great. Jesse Solomon Israel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I want to begin with your story. Let's go back to your sophomore year at NYU. You're sitting in your dorm room and decided to embark on a life-changing path by starting a record label, Cantora Records, and signing the wildly popular psychedelic rock duo, MGMT. What was that like for you?
It was a really interesting learning experience. I had no idea what I was doing, and neither did my roommate, who I started the label with. We were 20 years old, and we were sophomores. I was a film student. I'd never really done anything in pursuit of business before. So we just kind of learned by messing up and by trying things. And it was really fun to do something different and to give ourselves to a creative project. We're still, feeling like adults for the first time, only 1 year into college. And it was a blast. But by the time I was 23 and the band had really taken off, I was really pushing myself and working hard, and also partying and kind of trying to figure out what it meant to be a young business person while also existing in the world of the music industry, which could be pretty intense. And by the time I was 23, I was already burning out. And it didn't make any sense to me because, I had this kind of cool, sexy business that was being built, but internally I was having panic attacks and experiencing pretty debilitating anxiety, and didn't really feel like it was something I could talk about with people at the time.
So tell me how your father influenced you and directed you towards meditation as a means to offset your panic attacks and stressors.
Yeah, so it was right around this time when I was starting to experience this stuff. And like I mentioned, as a man, it didn't really feel like something I could talk about or something that was supposed to be happening to me. And in the music industry, there wasn't much space for that dialogue. So luckily, my parents have always been really open people and have always made space for me to talk about what's going on for me. And I've always felt safe being able to chat with them about that. So I went to my dad and, talked to him about what was going on, which wasn't an easy conversation to have. But he had been really into some of the modern Buddhist teachers like Pema Chodron. And he was just starting to learn about mindfulness. This was like, I'm 35 now. So this was 13 years ago. And he recommended, about 12 years ago, he recommended that I check out meditation as a way to start to work through some of those challenges. And he was barely meditating at the time, so he didn't even really know where to send me. So I just was Googling in New York about places to learn to meditate. And my journey started.
So what in particular about the writings of Buddhist nun Pema Chodron struck you?
Well, my dad was really inspired by her work and started giving me, she would make these little mini books that I could read, little moments of prose at a time. And she was the first person that I really heard talking about self-love, kindness, compassion, being gentle with ourselves. And it was such an interesting philosophy and mindset, because it was so different than the way I conceived the world and work, and the way that I showed up in work in the music industry. There was not a lot of conversation around that either, right? So I was working very hard, and the way that I sort of modeled myself in regards to how I could show up as a work person, as a young guy, as a man in the industry, was to just work as hard as possible. That's how I saw success. You just grind super hard. You kind of do whatever it takes to get to the top. And there's also some music industry mindset in there too. So here I was reading these little teeny books about self-compassion and self-love and creating space for rest and taking care of ourselves. I was like, wow, these two worlds feel really different and interesting to me.
How did you land on Vedic meditation as your meditation of choice, and what is that?
So I initially learned some of the Buddhist practices. I learned at a place called Shambhala. And it was really interesting. I started practicing and was noticing benefits. And about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 months into my personal meditation journey, I was introduced to a Vedic meditation teacher named Light Watkins. And I did his meditation course, and it was a game changer. For me, what I really loved about it, and what I've loved about Vedic meditation, which is similar to transcendental meditation, not the same, but I would say similar, is that it's such an effortless practice. It's not about clearing the mind of thought. We sit comfortably with back support. We close our eyes. It's about generating deep rest in the system. It's very physically restful, physically relaxing. And it just really clicked for me. The practice really clicked for me. So I started practicing it 20 minutes twice a day. And in a very short period of time, started to notice real meaningful shifts in my life, not only around stress and anxiety and panic attacks starting to subside, and the antidepressant medications that I was taking. One in particular, I was able to start to, wean down off of. I was noticing some great benefits like that, but also I was just feeling like I was getting more clear about who I was and what I really stood for in the world. And that was exciting and scary, because the more I was meditating, the more I realized, this is after a couple-year period, that some of the things that I was giving myself to no longer felt aligned. And this, I think this happens when we start to practice meditation on a regular basis and we get more clear about who we are and how we want to give to the world. It may mean some relationships changing. It may mean the way that we show up in work changing, or maybe our jobs change or our roles change, or maybe we start completely fresh like I did. So it definitely created, I would say my Vedic practice really created a clarity between my brain, my heart, my gut. And it allowed me to really hear kind of that intuitive call. So when it felt really clear that it was time to move on from my record label, and that I'd sort of experienced all the growth that was there for me over 9 years, and I knew it was time to move on, I'd say my Vedic practice not only helped give me the clarity for that, but also gave me the courage to take that leap. I only had a few months of savings to be able to go and do that, but I did.
So how did this lead to your second act, and you're only in your 20s still, with The Big Quiet?
Well, it was, like I mentioned, scary to move away from working in an industry that I'd only known, right? Since I was 20, from 20 to 29, I worked in the music industry and the tech industry together. And it was really scary to think about who Jesse was, who I was, without being the guy with the music company. Because since I was 20, I was identifying with the success of bands that had done well, like MGMT, and being able to, at a dinner party, people say, "What do you do?" And I say, "I run a record label." And people go, "Ooh," and there I was, no longer feeling called to doing that work, and my identity started to really change. This is where I was at the time, of course, and it was really tough for me. And I, of course, chose to make this career transition, but it was still very challenging for me. And what I was noticing was that I was really feeling isolated in New York. I find that there were definitely periods in my life living in the city where it could feel lonely. So when I had left my company and I was trying to figure out what was next, I was thinking about ways to be with other people, to find meaningful ways to gather. I was burnt out on the party scene and concerts and all that. So I was trying to look for other ways to gather. And a lot of my peers, specifically from the music industry, were interested in reducing their stress and their anxiety and becoming interested in meditation. So I started gathering these group meetups at my buddy's apartment in downtown Manhattan called Medi Club, short for meditation, where, modern busy people would come together at the end of the day once a month. We'd meditate, and then we'd check in and talk about the real things that were going on behind the Instagram headlines and the successes that we would, celebrate when we were at parties or at work conferences or whatever. And it was so interesting to share quiet with people that I was used to being around so much noise with. And then there's something almost kind of awkward and vulnerable about being silent with this group. And then to be able to talk about real stuff and realize I really wasn't the only person that was going through some of these mental health challenges, and that I'd say most of my peers in that room were. So there was something really healing and validating about having space to go quiet together, and then to really be in community and talk about real shit and support each other. And we just continued to do it every month. I had no plan for a business model. I just was feeling into something that I could sense was a need. And the word spread. We didn't have we actually still don't have a website for MediClub. Something that still meets. And by the 5th or 6th month, my buddy's loft was filled with 100+ people just through word of mouth, and we could tell that there was something here that was really clicking. So we created the Big Quiet as a way to take that experience and extend it to the city at large. And we did our first one at Summer Stage Central Park, this legendary venue that when I had my label, I always dreamed of having our bands play at. And here we were for our first Big Quiet event. And the city gave us the whole venue. It was really spectacular. So we had a ton of people come together for this first Big Quiet mass meditation.
That's amazing. So what is the science, what is the science behind and benefits of meditation, especially on the nervous system?
Yeah, so I'll speak to it briefly. I can go really deep in it, but I'll keep it surface level. The way that I really like to speak about it is through understanding stress. And you say specifically in regards to the nervous system, stress is the result of our body's fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system, reacting and thinking that our body is under attack or that there's some threat to our survival. Now, when we were hunters and gatherers living in tribes, which is how we existed for the great majority of our time on this earth, fight or flight was an awesome, incredibly helpful physiological response. If we were going out and we were about to go hunt for our afternoon lunch and a saber-toothed tiger jumped out on the path, the body's fight or flight response would turn on, and a handful of physiological changes would occur to allow us to be in a position where we could best fight or flee from that tiger. So cortisol would pump through the blood. That's the hormone that says emergency, emergency, pay attention, alert, right? Our arteries would shrink, our blood would thicken, so we don't bleed out as much if we get bit by that tiger. Blood becomes more acidic. The digestive system and the reproductive system turns off, so we have more energy to go towards fighting or fleeing that tiger. So it can really help when we're actually under attack, when we're faced with a human hungry predator. But here we are today in a very short period of time. It's only been about 10,000 years since we all lived in tribes, and particularly in the past 50 so years, as the input and information that we've been taking on a daily basis is so great. We're living in this day and age where a rude email or a triggering social media post or sitting in an Uber and having cars blow their horns at you when you're sitting in traffic, these things are triggering the fight or flight response. And that feeling in your stomach, that feeling where you say, ah. And the body is not able to discern between a saber-toothed tiger that's about to eat us and an email from a colleague that's being passive aggressive, that's triggering stress in us. So the body's trying to help us, but a lot of the triggers that we're experiencing today, the fight or flight triggers that we're experiencing today, are not necessary for our survival. The body just doesn't know it. So when we practice meditation, what's happening is when we go into practice, the body's fight or flight response turns off and the parasympathetic nervous system turns on. This is the body's relaxation response. This is when the immune system strengthens, blood starts to flow more fluidly, digestive system kicks in, reproductive system kicks in, right? Instead of cortisol pumping through the blood, we start to experience dopamine and serotonin hormones moving through our system. These are the chemicals that allow us to feel a sense of happiness or well-being. It's why meditation is often, you'll hear people talk about, I feel so blissed out when I meditate. Because we actually have bliss chemicals moving through our blood. So we wind up sleeping better at night, feeling more creative. Certain parts of the brain turn on, light up, actually become thicker. And our memory centers start to increase, our ability to learn, to decision make. All this stuff enhances. And like I mentioned in my process, once we start to feel clearer, once the nervous system has become more balanced from the rest that we're getting by turning off the fight or flight and turning on the relaxation response, we start to get more clear about how we can give ourselves to the world around us, how we can really contribute to the world around us. And this is why I'm so passionate about this work.
So why is it important to rest and slow down at any time in one's life, and especially start this process at a young age, as you did?
Well, I mentioned that the amount of information that we're processing today is a lot for the system. In fact, when we lived in tribes, when we were hunters and gatherers, the amount of information that we would process in an entire lifetime is equivalent to just 1 day of information that we process today. So this is a lot for our body's systems to be able to make sense of and to hold. And for so many of us, it's not sustainable. And the burden that it's creating, the stress that it's creating, is the result of 90% of doctor visits today because of stress. Insomnia has become an epidemic in our country. So when we're able to start to practice, and ideally at any time, I mean, the younger the better, in my opinion, what we're doing is we're repairing the body from built up stress, and we're preventing future stressors. We're starting to shift how we react to stress. So yeah, we can do this anytime. We can do this, I don't know if I'd say any age, but there's a certain age where kids can start to get into it and bring really meaningful practice into their lives. So we're able to start to position ourselves to create a healthier foundation for how we engage with and interact with the demands of the world around us.
So you led massive group meditations for big brands like Google, Adidas, and where I had the pleasure of experiencing your practice at Oprah's 2020 Vision Tour, where you guided 15,000 of us at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. What did that feel like from your perspective to quiet an entire arena?
Oh, I love that question. It was truly unlike anything I'd experienced. Look, I'd been really blessed up to that point to have been able to guide big quiet mass meditations for huge groups. But the biggest we had done was probably 3,000 or 4,000, which is a really cool accomplishment. But at the start of this year, when we were invited to tour with Oprah, I really had no idea what it was going to be like to hold that quiet space for 15,000 to 17,000 people. These are the largest meditations ever in our country that we've been able to find out about, at least. And we didn't know if it was going to work. And it was actually really cool because Oprah's team was really open to taking that risk with us. And we were actually originally only supposed to do one. It was going to be the launch event in Fort Lauderdale. I wasn't booked to be on the whole tour. It was just sort of an experiment for the first one. And part of what we designed together was it would be a 10-minute guided practice, which is a significant amount of time for an arena show. And, you know, you have people in the boxes who are so excited to see Oprah, who are celebrating, the energy's really high. So we didn't know what was going to happen. And what we wanted to do was take 60 seconds of that 10-minute meditation to have no guidance, no sound bowls, just total silence in the arena. So it was nerve-wracking to go into that. And the first experience of that first stop at Fort Lauderdale, it really worked. There was a palpable and like a tangible feeling during the meditation, especially during the 60 seconds of quiet. And at each tour stop, we wound up getting invited to go and do this at all 9 stops of our tour for over a 10-week period. At each tour stop, every single person, over 135,000 people, wound up participating and respecting in the quiet. At no point was anyone yelling or laughing or making sound. I mean, if one person coughed, you could hear it in the whole thing. And there was just something really powerful about we're all contributing and participating to this moment together. And all it takes is one person to pull away from that. But we were all in it together. And there was something really special about that feeling. And the last thing I'll say is bringing that many people into their hearts. And then, of course, Oprah does this so beautifully through her teaching. But, you know, having the Big Quiet be a part of an arena show that brings people into their hearts, bring people into their bodies. So when they leave and you have 15,000 people then go spill out into the city, and they're bringing some of that bigger heart, some of that slowed down nervous system, some of the benefits that we talked about into their lives, we really feel like there's a ripple in that. And that's something that Oprah and I both felt like was really a special part of this tour, was sending people with more love into the world.
Did you get to meditate with Lady Gaga and Michelle Obama?
I don't know if they actually wound up meditating or not, but I did get to hang out with Michelle Obama right after the Big Quiet. And I know that she mentioned that she's been really getting into yoga and meditation. So it was just awesome to be able to spend time with her right after doing something like this with Oprah.
Great interview. So at the last Big Quiet event with Oprah, Oprah mentioned how she noticed lots of people had been crying during the meditations. And then she asked you why that is. So tell us why that can happen.
Well, particularly when we were on tour with Oprah, the way that I was guiding the practice was I was inviting people during the meditation to have a moment where they thought about someone that they loved, and it could be someone that was alive or someone that was passed away. And of course, we're doing this while our eyes are closed with 15,000 people in total silence. And what this practice does, and then we move on to have people send love to someone that they're having a tough time with, send love to themselves. We're giving people permission in a big group to actually feel into their feelings and to actually allow themselves to feel whatever's coming up in the heart space, in that moment of emotion. This is a rare practice because so much of, I would say, society in the world around us says if you have good feelings, great, celebrate them. If you have bad feelings or bad emotions, let's say bad, go fix them, or don't pay attention to them, or cover them up. So here we were having groups of 15,000 people at a time be given permission to just feel what's going on in their hearts. This is a really rare practice. And for a lot of people, when they finally let go, or they start thinking about someone they love, or they give themselves permission to love themselves, a lot comes up. And Oprah was right. A lot of people were crying, but it was, I would say, it was beautiful tears. And the feedback we got and what people were sharing with us was so touching. This is why we continued to do that. It wasn't like, hey, let's torture these people and their emotions. There was a real cathartic release that was occurring in large group. And I think in general, to answer the second part of your question, when we're able to give ourselves the permission to feel what we're feeling, to not resist it or judge it, but to just allow ourselves to feel the emotions that we're feeling, especially right now in this challenging year. This is how we're able to work through, move through, grow through those emotions and learn through those emotions. My concept is, and I didn't coin this, but when we allow ourselves to feel whatever we're feeling, even if it's tough stuff, it's like opening a window and letting a fresh breeze move in through our system, giving ourselves that permission. This is the ultimate mindfulness practice. And what happens usually when we allow ourselves to do that and we bring ourselves to some love while also holding a challenging emotion, is the challenging emotion starts to melt and we're able to learn from the experience of it.
I love that. With the dawn of COVID, you leaned into digital offerings, participating in mass meditations over Zoom, with Oprah Winfrey as well, offering weekly Instagram live sessions and online courses. Why is now a great time to learn to practice meditation?
Like we talked about earlier in regards to what our nervous systems are taking on and how much information and input and stressors are existing in the world today, I think it's extra important to have practices that allow us to face the challenges and the demands and the intensity of the world that we live in right now. To have practices that allow us extra rest, that allow the nervous system to come closer to operating in the way that it's designed to operate in. Same with the brain. The brain is designed, the way that the brain works most successfully is through pulsation, meaning that it does focused work and then it rests. It does focused work and then it rests. It's a pulsation, work, rest, work, rest. The way that we've grown to live our lives, especially in the intensity of work culture and what's happening in our country and in our world with the pandemic, the brain is doing less pulsation. It's less work, rest, and it's just work, 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 receive information, experience stressors, make sense of what's happening, try to process fear and this and that, right? There's so much. And what happens when we don't give a system, in this case, the brain, the space to actually pulse, to actually get that rest, is it burns out. It breaks down. And this is why we are seeing such an intensified level of mental health challenges right now. We were already seeing that before the pandemic. So it's so important that we create space to rest, that we give ourselves permission. And I understand that there's very different range of based on our living conditions, what we're capable of doing, how much time we can take to rest, right? For me, as you know, a single man who has the privilege to be able to take, you know, a couple weeks off is different than someone who is working a job and also homeschooling their kid because the kid can't go to school, right? May have a very different financial situation. Very different experiences here, but how can we, regardless of where we're at in that spectrum of lived experience, find moments where we can create rest for ourselves, find moments where we can turn our phones off for a little bit, create some boundaries about when we're Zooming, when we're checking email, when we're working, because that line has become so blurred, and make moments of quiet if that's just a couple of moments of noticing your breath, or if that's a 20-minute meditation practice like what I was talking about, this is so important right now to allow us to keep moving through and facing these challenges and showing up with our full self.
So, the burning question, what is the easiest way for someone to get started meditating, and what guided meditations do you recommend? How long should one be meditating for, and how many times a day? I know when you started, you mentioned earlier that you did 20 minutes a day, 2 times a day. So give us some of your advice.
Yeah. For people that feel called to learning meditation, I would say go ahead and learn it. And there are 2 ways that I'll recommend that you do that. The first is you can learn with me and the Big Quiet through the virtual course that we've been offering. We're teaching groups of people from all over the world, but just 30 people at a time. And you can check it out at thebigquiet.com's website. It's 3 90-minute sessions. I teach people how to meditate. And by the time the course is done, you have the understanding and the skill set to be able to practice on your own anytime, anywhere, plus access to group meditations to stay with it. We have different pricing for different people based on where you're at, based on what your financial situation is. We'll never turn someone away from taking the course because of money. This is a great way to jump in. If people don't feel as called to going and learning with me in this moment, I love recommending the One Giant Mind meditation app. It's the number One Giant Mind. It's free and it's always free. And it takes people through a meditation journey where you'll actually learn how to meditate through this app. And it's a great way to get in. I'm suggesting these 2 things because I think having instruction either through an app or through a teacher like myself is a really meaningful way to create a daily habit around meditation. That's my recommendation. But if neither of those options makes click for people, then I say check out the apps where you can do a couple minutes. And at a bare minimum, there's a really, really simple breathing exercise, which I'll share with you right now if you'd like, that anyone can do anytime, anywhere. And it's a great practice when you're feeling those heightened moments of stress or anxiety. That's before you're going to go into a meeting or at a meal with a family, before when things are a little heated, or just by yourself. This little short practice that I'll do with you at 60 seconds resets the nervous system for a moment. It actually does. It gives you a taste of what I was talking about with the benefits of meditation. So you can try this as a bare minimum as a short mindfulness practice. Do you want to do it together?
I would love that, and our viewers.
Okay, great. Super simple. So all it is 3 big breaths. And at the top of each breath, you hold your breath for a little bit. It's that simple. We'll do it in a second. And when people feel like they need an extra dose of the centering that comes with this practice, you can do 5 big breaths, holding your breath at the top of each breath. So we'll just do 3 here for the sake of time. So you can do it sitting down or standing. You can do it eyes open or eyes closed. Since we're both seated, let's close our eyes. And anyone that's viewing this can close their eyes. And you start by taking a big breath through the nose, into your belly, up into your chest, holding it for a moment, and letting it out. And taking in another big breath through the nose, air filling up your belly, expanding into your lungs and into your chest, really filling it all up, holding it for a moment, and letting it all out. And one last big breath through the nose, into the belly, filling the chest, holding it, sipping in a bit more air, holding it, and letting it all out. And just taking a moment to notice your chest very gently rising and falling as you breathe at your own pace. And you can slowly open your eyes. And we're back, a little mini meditation.
Jesse Israel, thank you so much. You've helped so many people, and we appreciate your time today and look forward to many more meditation sessions with you.
Thank you so much. So great to be here. Honored to be a part of Connect for Ideas Festival. Love the Purist. Hope to stay in touch and chat more soon.
Thank you, Jesse. Have a wonderful
Bye.
day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you to our sponsors. Brain Juice, Boxed water is better. OHO Full Spectrum CBD. Rejuvenation Health.